Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 101: A Scumbag Ex-Boyfriend? Seeing this scene, everyone understood. May I ask timidly, is Hitsugaya throwing the fight? No, yes he is. Don't doubt it, brother, this is blatant acting now. What's going on? Is this the legendary holding back an ocean? Seeing Hitsugaya's actions, everyone was shocked and confused, including Ichigo. But in reality, Hitsugaya was operating from the stratosphere. Because after understanding Ichigo's identity as a Shinigami, he naturally mastered the "let's see who doesn't give Garp respect today" mentality of the neighboring marine admirals. Anyway, no matter what others thought, facing the son of his former captain, Hitsugaya definitely had to give him some respect. And he had used his ultimate move. Ichigo had already taken down 4 captains before him. Who could say he didn't try? It's just that the Ryoka was too strong. In the distance, seeing this, Ranjiku was also both amused and exasperated. She never expected Hitsugaya to pull such a move. Then, Ranjiku looked ahead at Jin. Sure enough, even Jin, witnessing Hitsugaya's slick move, had the corner of his mouth twitching. He had originally intended to provoke and goad Hitsugaya into fighting with words, never expecting Hitsugaya to suddenly understand mid-fight and start throwing the match. This left him with a mouthful of complaints he didn't know whether to voice or not. Jin's plan was that, given Hitsugaya's strength, Yoruchi hiding behind Ichigo would surely come to save him. But now he had to do it himself, to force Yoruchi out. However, even thinking this, Jin was still extremely displeased. He really wanted to slack off too. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Bearing the anger of being unable to slack off, Jin drew his Shinso. It seems it's finally up to me to take action. Kurosaki Ichigo, let's continue our unfinished duel. Like the previous captains, Jin stepped onto the suspension bridge. But this time, the people hiding in the shadows couldn't possibly let Ichigo face Jin anymore. From the distance, several small spheres were thrown at the feet of Ichigo and Jin. The spheres then exploded. Bang! Thick smoke engulfed Jin and Ichigo. Simultaneously, a swift figure rushed into the smoke. The next moment, 2 figures jumped out of the smoke from where Ichigo originally was. Immediately, Ichigo's vision suddenly dropped, and a sense of weightlessness struck. From the high suspension bridge, Ichigo, along with Kokaku and the others, fell at high speed. However, Ichigo didn't pay attention to his rapidly falling body. In midair, Ichigo looked at Kokaku and Yoruchi beside him. I think I could still fight for a bit. The injury Tozen gave me is serious, but I haven't lost my ability to fight. Hearing Ichigo's words, Yoruchi spoke helplessly. I also know you could still fight for a while. The problem is, if we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave later. There's a troublesome person arriving. Troublesome? Who? Ichigo looked up in confusion. At that moment, he finally understood why Yoruchi was in such a hurry to leave. Yoruchi's single-minded follower, Suifoam, had arrived. At this moment, Suifoam was glaring furiously at the group flying using the Shihoin clan's heaven-stepping adornment. Seeing Suifoam, Ichigo understood why it was Kokaku who came to rescue him, and why Yoruchi was still in her cat form. Obviously, a certain goddess of Flash also knew that her behavior of impulsively abandoning Suifoam and running off with a man was very scummy. She was a cat with self-awareness. However, Ichigo clearly shouldn't know about Suifoam's situation at the moment. So Ichigo asked in puzzlement. Who is that young girl? Why is she staring at us with such anger and resentment? It's like she discovered an ex-boyfriend who abandoned her to go fool around has secretly come back? Hearing Ichigo's words, Kokaku laughed quite vulgarly. Put. Ex-boyfriend, ha, so accurate. Hearing this, Yoruchi couldn't hold back anymore. She said anxiously. What ex-boyfriend? It's just because the captain of the 2nd Division, Suifeng, has incredibly fast Shuanpa and is very serious and responsible. So once she latches onto us, we really won't be able to escape. Is that so? Ichigo pretended to be fooled. Yes. Yoruchi the cat nodded. It's all based on rational consideration. Alright then, I'll believe you this once. Under the transport of the heaven-stepping adornment, Kokaku and Yoruchi took Ichigo to the secret base to treat his injuries. However, the shockwaves caused by Ichigo's great battle were just beginning. The news that a mysterious Ryoka arrived to rescue Rukia, challenged and defeated 5 captains in front of the Sokayaku Hill, and only escaped under the pressure of the arriving Suifeng, spread throughout the entire Soul Society. In the 5th Division, having received this news via Tendikura, Renji was shocked. He couldn't help but look at the gentle figure in front of him and ask. Captain Aizen, is this true? Captain Kachiki, Captain Zaraki, Captain Hitsugaya, Captain Tozen, Captain Kamamura, were they really all defeated by that guy? But as Renji asked, he noticed Aizen was just standing with his back to him, silent, as if also digesting this news. Captain Aizen? Renji couldn't help but ask again. This time, Aizen finally turned around. Having well concealed his surprise, a heavy expression appeared on Aizen's kind face. This is a message directly notified by Captain Unohana. It should be true. After all, that senior isn't the type to play tricks. However, Abarai, with 5 captains seriously injured in the attack, the defensive power of the Soul Society has suddenly been halved. Do you understand what this means? Aizen looked meaningfully at Renji. Captain Aizen, you mean? Recalling what Aizen had told him earlier about the mastermind, Renji's expression turned grave. That's right. Aizen nodded heavily. Rukia's execution is very suspicious. If this was deliberately arranged by someone, then the goal the mastermind wanted to achieve is almost accomplished now. Renji asked nervously, then what will they do next? I don't know. Aizen shook his head, completing the final setup. To find out more, I may need to investigate personally. Then, as if suddenly realizing something, Aizen looked at Renji apologetically. Sorry, Abarai, these are all just speculations. I seem to have said too much. By the way, that boy, Kurosaki Ichigo, you've had contact with him before, right? Can you tell me about him? Kurosaki Ichigo. Remembering Ichigo, Renji fell into recollection. Not long after, Renji, full of worries, walked out of the 5th Division's barracks. Watching Renji leave, outside the 5th Division's barracks, Jin, with a mysterious smile on his face, slipped inside when no one was paying attention. However, unlike the kind man Renji saw. This time, after Jin entered, Aizen showed a completely different face. Chapter 102 Cat Shihuan Yoruchi. Jin, talk. About that boy. With his back to Jin, Aizen stood with his hands clasped behind him, imposing and unmoving like a deep pool or a lofty mountain. Yes, Captain Aizen. Jin began his account. As he narrated, Aizen's plans began to change drastically. Thus, one day later, within the Central 46, a new order was issued. Due to the rampant audacity of the external Ryoka, the dignity of the Seriitii must not be violated. Therefore, the execution date for the severe criminal Rukia is moved forward. Time, 5 days from now. Once the order from the Central 46 came out, all Shinigami, and the players hidden among the Shinigami, scratched their heads in utter confusion. At the same time, in the 2ND Division's Technology Department. Where exactly is the threat to me coming from? Londa was frantic. Because the 2nd Division also had a technology department, and deeply feeling it was too dangerous to stay alone in the 12th Division, Londa had long since used connections to transfer to the 2nd Division. However, ever since Ichigo entered, he had received a game currency bet, yet no matter how he tried, he couldn't find any evidence that he would be attacked. Even the situation in the Seriitii was becoming increasingly incomprehensible to Londa. Looking at the situation analysis written on the blackboard ahead, Londa scratched his head, overturned it again, and began writing and drawing on it like a madman. There must be a mastermind behind the scenes. There's also a problem with the Central 46. The question is it among the 13 captains, or forces outside the Siriitii, or perhaps the Ryoka? Who exactly is manipulating this chessboard? Damn it, insufficient intelligence, damn it. Faced with the massive vortex that was the Siriitii, Londa felt his brain cells dying for the first time. Indeed, trying to figure out what complicated people intended to do was far more difficult than solving one or two scientific problems. However, adhering to the principle of eliminating all impossibilities, leaving the last one, no matter how improbable, as the inevitable truth, Londa finally deduced what the crisis he might face could be. That's right, it must be the players. Londa fetched another picture. In this picture, the flamboyant Sister May was like a peacock, possessing a kind of androgynous beauty. Ayasega wa Yumichika. It seems the only ones who could move against me are you brutes from the 11th Division. Humph, let me see just how you plan to make a move against me. Londa pondered on how to utilize the 2ND Division's strength, but he didn't know that his current appearance was being watched by someone. In Londa's livestream, bullet comments scrolled. Haha, is this the Shigua's #1 genius? Guess is all wrong, not even close. Don't just hate on him, the previous commenter. At least the identity was guessed correctly, not completely off, though Sister May is taking the bullet. Honestly, I'm a bit worried about Sister May and the others. What if this bastard strikes first? Don't worry, you have no idea who Sister May and the others have encountered. Who? Seeing the question, someone in the bullet comments silently uploaded a video link. There, Sister May, along with a barely treated Ichigo, ran into Yuria and the others. Seeing Yuria's wary gaze, Sister May gave a faint smile. You are Kurosaki Ichigo's companions, right? May I ask where you are heading now? Don't worry, we mean no harm. In fact, we can even offer you assistance. Sensing Sister May's goodwill, the trio was half convinced, half doubting. However, with Oraheim making the final decision, they tentatively decided to believe. With this powerful trio temporarily joining the 11th Division's ranks, no matter what schemes Londa devised, his plans would not come to fruition. So this time, not just the Dongui audience, even the Shigwa audience were dissatisfied with Londa. Still the #1 genius? Always scheming here, not really improving his own strength, just claiming to be acquiring knowledge under a fancy name. Laughable. Others, like Xin Na, are truly learning knowledge. Exactly. #1 genius, worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with Lady Xin Na? Disgusting. #1 conspiracy theory genius, that's more like it. With such narrow-mindedness, isn't it simply impossible to pose any threat to Ichigo? Mentioning Ichigo, the Shigwa bullet comments also turned sour. Look at the kind of life he's living now, then look at this bastard Londa. What a gap! After typing this line, this Shigwa viewer also closed Londa's livestream and adeptly switched to Ichigo's. On the screen, within a vast, yellow, empty space remarkably similar to Urahara Shop's underground space, Ichigo was comfortably soaking in a hot spring. Originally, he didn't need to soak this long, but while the injuries on his body had healed, deeper within, his Ryuryoka wasn't fully recovered, so he had to continue soaking. After all, fighting 5 captains in succession, even if the last one was an actor who went easy, the strain and toll on the body were extremely severe. It was only because Ichigo had a solid foundation. Anyone else would likely have some lasting effects. Estimating the time, Ichigo, who had been silently soaking with his eyes closed, opened them. From behind came the sound of light, careful footsteps. Ichigo, it's time to eat. Looking back, Kukaku approached carrying a meal tray. Seeing the lunch she brought, lavish even by modern standards, Ichigo was quite surprised. Did you guys rob the Siriitii's cafeteria or something? The Siriitii's cafeteria wouldn't make such a lavish meal for an ordinary division's member. From beside Kukaku's feet, the Yaruchi cat emerged. I went back to the Shihoin house and had the family chefs prepare this for you. The Shihoin house? Ichigo was taken aback, looking at the Yoruchi cat. What, was this black-hearted cat finally going to reveal her identity? That's right, the Shihoin house. Yoruchi sauntered over on her short legs to Ichigo's side. Earlier, after sending Ichigo to this playground-like area and arranging for him to soak in the hot spring to recover, Yoruchi and Kukaku had immediately left and made a trip back to the Shihoin house. Thanks to the Shihoin clan's control over the two ND Division's intelligence channels, Yoruchi had also gained a general understanding of the current Soul Society situation. Simply put, it wasn't very friendly. Ichigo defeating 5 captains single-handedly was like a nuclear bomb detonating in the Soul Society. Even the Central 46 had moved up the execution date to avoid complications, further elevating Ichigo's status. For a time, Shinigami in the Soul Society actually grew fearful at the mention of Ryoka. The entire Siriitii entered a state of high alert. For now, Yoruchi herself was confident she could still move about outside, but others might not be so fortunate. Everyone had to go into hiding, so Yoruchi was now at leisure as well. With a plop, the Yoruchi cat jumped into the water and elegantly swam to a position in front of Ichigo. Casually grabbing the cat and giving her a vigorous petting, Ichigo asked, "If I remember correctly, the Shihoin clan is one of the 4 great noble families, like Rukia's Kachiki clan, right? So, you, this strange cat who isn't afraid of water, are actually a noble cat." Hearing Ichigo's words, Yoruchi's golden cat eyes gave him a very human-like, coquettish glance. What, doesn't it seem like it? Ha ha ha, that arrogant air does seem rather fitting. Ichigo laughed, then lowered his head, meeting Yoruchi's gaze, looking at this black cat with inquiry and uttering words that shocked countless live-stream viewers. So, you're human, right? I guess your current cat form is probably some kind of technique. Combined with you going to the Shihoin house, your full name must be Shihoin Yoruchi, correct, Yoruchi-san? Ichigo said with a smile. Era, men who are too clever and inquisitive tend to be disliked by women, you know. Yoruchi chuckled, neither confirming nor denying. However, such an attitude was undoubtedly an admission. Instantly, the bullet comments were shocked. Holy sheet! This Yoruchi really is Shihoin Yoruchi? No way, can people really turn into cats? Wow, so doesn't that mean this Yoruchi cat is actually a hidden big shot? Brothers, it all makes sense now. A mysterious shopkeeper funds a group of hot-blooded youths charging into the enemy's den. Of course he wouldn't just let these impulsive kids get battered, so he prepared a backup plan. The backup is Yoruchi. Except Ichigo is just too formidable, so much so that Shihoin Yoruchi could only reveal her identity now. Ha ha ha, so the awesome one is still Ichigo? You could say that. But what I'm most looking forward to is the next part, he. A knowledgeable viewer typed. Seeing this knowledgeable viewer's comment, a group of other knowledgeable viewers were also summoned, flooding the screen with he comments. However, since there were knowledgeable viewers, there were also those who didn't understand. A genuine newbie typed curiously, next part? What else is going to happen? But this time, no one with ample experience came out to explain to the newbie. Chapter 103: The Beautiful Scenery. On the live stream screen, the fixed camera angle suddenly began moving from Ichigo's side to behind Ichigo. Then, just as the camera could still capture a bit of Yoruchi cat's form, a puff of smoke emanated from Yoruchi. Subsequently, the camera angle completely moved behind Ichigo. Looking from behind Ichigo, a dark-skinned, purple-haired big sister with a cat-like playful smile appeared right in front of Ichigo. Although most of her body was blocked by Ichigo, from the coffee-colored shoulders and part of her fair arms that the audience could see, they could imagine what a blood-boiling state Yoruchi must be in before Ichigo at this moment. Why? Why does the camera angle start moving every time it gets to moments like this? Bastard, Ichigo can see it, but I can't? Damn it, we don't want to look at a man's back. Just thinking about the kind of view Ichigo had before him now made the live stream audience wail with envy and jealousy. Of course, some objected. A bunch of pervert, Isn't my Ichigo-sama good enough to look at? Some old woman of unknown age, what's there to see? What, goddess of flash, Yoruchi, she's clearly just an exhibitionist who likes to walk around naked as a cat. Who knows how many people have been with her behind the scenes? Damn woman, stay away from my Ichigo-sama. The members of Ichigo's fan club verbally attacked Yoruchi, wishing they could replace her. However, they didn't know that Yoruchi's current state wasn't exactly ideal. Having transformed from cat to human, Yoruchi smiled playfully while looking at Ichigo, wanting to see an expression of surprise, shyness, or even panic on his face. Because Ichigo was too powerful and acted mature enough, this was something Yoruchi had always wanted to see on his face since they first met. But no matter how Yoruchi smiled or how she presented herself, Ichigo's expression remained calm and collected. In his eyes, Yoruchi couldn't see a trace of shyness, only a brazen appraisal and even a hint of disdain. For a moment, Yoruchi, who had been smiling seductively and freely, found it hard to maintain her composure. She had paid such a price hoping to startle Ichigo a bit, but now, Ichigo's complete lack of reaction made her feel like a clown instead. Yoruchi even discreetly separated the visual obstacles and looked down. Indeed, no reaction. An awkward silence spread. Instantly, Yoruchi felt an itch all over, as if ants were crawling, uncomfortable and ill at ease. Looking at Ichigo, even forgetting she was still in the middle of giving a benefit, Yoruchi couldn't help but ask, "Hey, looking at me like this, you really don't have any reaction at all?" "Heh, reaction?" Ichigo glanced at Yoruchi disdainfully. "The reaction is that all? Not sexy enough." Ichigo was no pure, inexperienced virgin like the original Ichigo. He had seen it all, experienced much, and was deeply perceptive. The cat form had been quite interesting to him, but now that the cat had turned into a human, and without even cat ears, she expected him to have a reaction? Ha! With this in mind, Ichigo looked at Yoruchi again. This time, his gaze swept over her entirely, but his reaction remained unchanged, only appreciation. Instantly, Yoruchi trembled all over. The three words "not sexy enough" echoed in her mind like the tolling of a great bell. As a master of Hakuda, her powerful heart beat violently at this moment, frantically pumping blood to her brain. She was getting heated. Yoruchi was getting heated. For a woman, the matter of charm is a fundamental issue. She, a big sister several hundred years old, couldn't even get a positive comment from a 15-year-old virgin boy before her. It's simply unbearable. Yoruchi directly rose from the hot spring, using concentrated erasure under her feet to create the effect of standing on the water's surface. Taking a slight step forward, Yoruchi extended her exquisite, beautifully curved bare foot and placed it, not too lightly nor too heavily, on Ichigo's chest, looking down at him as if a queen surveying her territory. "How about now?" Leaning back against the edge of the hot spring like a lord, looking at Yoruchi's queenly gaze, Ichigo finally nodded. "Not bad, now there's a bit of flavor." "Hee, really just a bit?" Maintaining a perfect smile, Yoruchi asked, leaning forward slightly and unleashing her full charm. Ichigo spread his hands and laughed. "Of course. If you don't believe me, go check it yourself." Yoruchi looked down again. "It's indeed better than before, but not by much." "TCH." Yoruchi clicked her tongue. Looking at Ichigo, she asked incredulously, "Are you really only 15 years old?" "Naturally. Guaranteed genuine." Grabbing Yoruchi's foot and pulling it down, Ichigo turned the tables. Although Ichigo was only 15 now, his body not fully grown, standing at only 174 centimeters, Yoruchi's figure, which appeared slender and tall, was actually only 156 centimeters. Holding Yoruchi like this, with their size contrast, Ichigo's dominance exploded. Thus, the plan to tease the little brother failed, and instead, Yoruchi's old face flushed, lowering her head in coy shyness. Watching this scene, Kokaku, who had been standing to the side with a faint smile, watching their interaction for a while, finally couldn't hold back. "Pfft, ha 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 ha, Yoruchi, is that all you've got?" Oh my, that Shihoin Yoruchi is actually blushing in a man's arms. "Ah, I really wish I could take a picture of you. No, I'm going to die laughing." Kukaku mercilessly mocked her. Facing Ichigo one-on-one was one thing, but under the ridicule of her best friend, Yoruchi finally couldn't take it anymore. "You little brat, laughing at me, are you? Get down here." Saying this, Yoruchi finally displayed a bit of the dominance she once had as the head of the Shihoin clan. Like a cute cat pouncing on prey, she directly pulled Kukaku down. Splash! Kukaku landed in the water with a bomb-like impact, splashing the healing spring water, coveted by countless people outside, everywhere. Towards Ichigo, Yoruchi was timid and reserved. But towards her best friend and good sister, Yoruchi struck hard. In an instant, Kukaku and Yoruchi began roughhousing in the hot spring water as if no one else was present. To be fair, girls fighting, pulling hair and clothes, can also be incredibly alluring and eye-catching. Especially since these were two big sisters several hundred years old, with good looks and figures. At the very least, watching the two of them, even with the holy light, the live stream audience couldn't take their eyes off, too busy to even envy Ichigo anymore. Only Ichigo remained, feeling somewhat perplexed by the lukewarm spring water that kept splashing against his face due to their unrestrained play fighting. Because this water wasn't just splashing Ichigo's face. It was slapping his dignity. Here he was, a young man full of vigor, sitting right here, yet being ignored. Did he not deserve any honor? Thus, after being splashed several more times, and even kicked once by a certain small foot, Ichigo finally couldn't take it anymore. Chapter 104: Consuming the Two Big Sisters. He stepped forward and grabbed one with each hand. At that moment, Yoruchi finally realized something was wrong. "Wait, I'm old." Yoruchi tried to say something. But her good sister Kukaku had already anticipated everything. She knew that the cat, bursting with curiosity, would one day be consumed by that very curiosity. That time was now. So Kukaku covered Yoruchi's mouth. Thus, even more water splashed from the hot spring onto the shore. Meanwhile, in the living world, Urahara Kisuke, having pulled another all-nighter on research, got up from bed and got dressed. For some reason, looking at his green and white striped hat, Kisuke suddenly had the thought to change his hat. "If that's the case, I'll change to a green hat next time." Tapping the small fan in his right hand against his left palm, Kisuke said happily. Immediately after, Kisuke cheerfully headed to the laboratory to continue his research. Regarding the separation of the Hogyoku when a person, the 300th experiment, begin. Kisuke was immersed in research, unable to extricate himself. He had no idea that in the Soul Society, Ichigo's sumptuous lunch wasn't finally eaten until noon the next day. And from then on, Ichigo had 2 extra side dishes every day. After all, cats steal fish, dogs eat dung, it's an unchangeable nature. However, Ichigo, immersed in day and night activities, didn't know he had become the most wanted person in the Soul Society. Soul Society, 3 days before Rukia's execution. Outside the captain's meeting room, the lieutenant gathering place, East Holy Wall. Ah! Momo's shrill scream heralded the prelude to Aizen's transformation. Looking at Aizen nailed to the East Holy Wall, Momo's eyes trembled, her expression filled with fear and disbelief. Hearing Momo's scream, Rinji, also participating in the meeting, quickly ran over. Following him, lieutenants like Ranjiku, Hiseiji, and Izuru, who were familiar or from the same academy year, hurried over. Captain Aizen. Recalling what Aizen had told him during their previous conversation, Rinji was deeply shaken. Similarly shaken were the Dongwa and Shigwa audiences following the perspective of Omida Marekio. Seeing Aizen nailed to the East Great Holy Wall, the live stream audience swelled through word of mouth. What's going on? Ichigo fought 5 and didn't kill any captains, but here one is dead? My god, and in such a manner. This is Aizen. I remember he was a very good man. How did he die like this? Or rather, to silently kill a captain and nail him to such a conspicuous location, who could do such a thing? Is the mastermind finally going to appear? Everyone who saw the scene of Aizen's corpse nailed to the wall was shocked to varying degrees. At the same time, they deeply understood one thing. No matter how much Ichigo caused trouble or fought before, there were no casualties in the Seriidii. But the moment Aizen's body was hung here, it proved that the situation in the Siriatii would enter a completely white-hot phase. The sky was changing. But if it were only to this extent, that would be fine. Not long after, news from the 4th Division shocked everyone once again. Although very reluctant to believe it, based on the residual Ryatsu and Aizen's wounds and even the wound patterns, it was judged that Aizen was killed by Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho. In other words, the murderer was Kurosaki Ichigo. Subsequently, the highest wanted order from the Central 46 was issued. After Aizen's death, the entire Soul Society became tense and apprehensive. However, the Central 46's wanted order, and the panicked Soul Society, had nothing to do with Ichigo at the moment. Hidden in Yoruichi's playground, Ichigo lived very comfortably every day. Time quickly arrived at the day of Rukia's execution. Early in the morning, Ichigo was awakened by the familiar heaviness on his body. Opening his eyes, Kukaku's satisfied smiling face appeared before him. He patted Kukaku's head to wake her up. Noticing the empty space beside him, Ichigo asked curiously, "Where's Yoruichi?" "Ah." Kukaku first sat up, stretching long and leisurely, causing countless holy lights to flash, before reacting to Ichigo's question. "Her?" Kukaku scratched her cheek. "Most likely, she's in a state of frantic post-event shame and regret, so she left early." "Ah, Yoruichi can feel shame?" Ichigo was very surprised. She wasn't here for just one night, but 3 days. He never knew that the proud cat would admit mistakes after doing something wrong. Getting 2 swipes from her would be considered good. And after that first time, Yoruichi didn't refuse later, did she? This is probably what they call hold back for a moment, get ovarian cysts, take a step back, get mammary hyperplasia. Kukaku knew her best friend very well, shrugging helplessly. After the initial emotions and indulgence and pleasure, Yoruichi has now entered a state of post-clarity regret and guilt. Hearing Kukaku's words, Ichigo was even more speechless. "So, can I assume this old cow devoured me and then ran off? I didn't even say anything." He. Kukaku stifled a laugh. "Ah, women are like that, no matter how old they are. She's not like me, who came with intentions from the start." As she spoke, Kukaku chuckled again, leaning on Ichigo's chest, tempting him. "So, what do you say, future head of the Shiba clan's branch family? Stay in the Soul Society after this? You, the branch family's head, won't be at a loss. Although it's a branch family, I, the head of the main Shiba clan, will accompany you every day. After all, Ganju's talent really isn't that great. The future Shiba clan will have to be inherited by your child from my womb." Persuading Ichigo, Kukaku once again used all her charms. TCH. Ichigo drew in a sharp breath. But looking at Kukaku, he also had a headache. He knew the Soul King's bloodline reached its culmination in him, but he didn't expect Kukaku to have her eyes on him from the very first meeting. The incident a few days ago was also something Kukaku had calculated and facilitated with a going-with-the-flow effect. In her words, "Isn't that what best friends are for, to be sold out?" With sisters packaged together, Ichigo's likelihood of being swayed would be greater. And Yoruichi herself had her own issues, and shedding blood was her own fault and she couldn't blame anyone. Not to mention that Ichigo would only stay in the Bleach world for 2.5 years, even if he could stay a lifetime. He didn't want to come to the Soul Society so early to live a feudal landlord life. Though the feudal landlord life was really awesome. Chapter 105, Heading to the Sokayako Hill. When the topic of the future came up, the two fell into a momentary silence. However, sensing Ichigo's silence, Kukaku already had a prepared response. "It's okay, you haven't had enough time in the living world, right? Time in the Soul Society is very long. I can wait. And there's Rukia, and that female classmate of yours, right? No problem, the Soul Society allows 3 wives and 4 mistresses. I don't intend to interfere with your marriage either." Kukaku smiled faintly. Although her current state wasn't entirely appropriate, her every move still revealed the cunning and calculation of a great clan's head. As long as you return to the Shiba clan, unlike Uncle did, everything is negotiable. Don't carry too much emotional burden. This is a transaction. Hearing this, Ichigo, witnessing such a way of thinking for the first time, was also very surprised. To even offer oneself as a condition, is this the head of a traditional great clan? But indeed, with Kokaku putting it this way, Ichigo felt less burdened. Alright then. Ichigo agreed. Anyway, he would agree now. What happened after he left was not his concern. After settling the conditions, the two quickly got up, dressed, washed up, and prepared to head to the Sokayako Hill. But then, Ichigo suddenly discovered a problem. Did Yoruchi leave her heaven-stepping adornment behind? Nope. Kokaku gave a sly smile. In your words, this is the cat's tiny, cute revenge, right? Yoruchi wants you to walk up there yourself, to comfort the unbearable pain she felt from the whipping, I guess. This. Ichigo pouted. Clearly, she's weak but loves to play. Fine, whatever. Hoisting Zangetsu onto his back, Ichigo headed towards the exit. For him, it was still early. The difference between flying there and walking there wasn't significant. Exiting with Kokaku, Ichigo identified their location. It should be near the Sokayako Hill, not far from the execution ground. After all, the Sokayako Hill was practically a landmark of the Soul Society, very conspicuous. Taking Kokaku with him, Ichigo directly sprinted towards the Sokayako Hill. However, Ichigo's forward progress didn't last long before he quickly stopped. Because ahead, the 5th Division's Lieutenant, Hinamori Momo, was waiting for Ichigo with a team of elite 5th Division's seated officers, her face full of hatred. Looking at Ichigo, the naive girl slowly drew her sword, words saturated with hatred forced out from between her teeth. Kurosaki Ichigo, I've finally waited for you. 3 days. Do you know how I've spent these 3 days? You couldn't imagine, right? Captain Aizen had long predicted your route and specifically arranged for us to block you here. Today, we will definitely slay you here. To comfort Captain Aizen's spirit in heaven. After saying this, Momo fired a signal flare into the sky. Then she led the 5th Division's seated officers to surround them. Simultaneously, dense footsteps sounded from all around, clearly indicating many people were rushing to this location. However, hearing Momo's words, Ichigo was utterly bewildered. What situation? Kill me to comfort Aizen's spirit in heaven? Ichigo looked at Kokaku in confusion. Didn't Yoruchi tell you? Kokaku showed perfectly timed surprise. Captain Aizen of the 5th Division was killed. The murderer is identified as you. So you've been issued a wanted order by the Central 46. You didn't know about this? Looking at Kokaku's fake surprise and mischievousness, Ichigo was speechless. Clearly, Kokaku knew, but she hadn't told Ichigo about it either. After that incident with Yoruchi, this first meeting bold and straightforward big sister had turned into a pure agent of chaos. So, this is another one of her little schemes? Ichigo scratched his head. MHM. Consider it a warm-up, Ichigo. Fine. Ichigo looked ahead at Momo, who was staring at him with intense hatred, and sighed. Yoruchi is one thing, but why is Aizen also like this? Wasn't he supposed to write a letter saying Hitsugaya Toshiro killed him, watching the sick pleasure of Momo and Hitsugaya turning their blades on each other? Why write about him? However, looking at Momo, Ichigo also felt a sense of injustice for Hitsugaya. Hey, Hinamori Momo, right? Do you know? Admiration is the furthest distance from understanding. Clearly, you greatly admire your Captain Aizen, but you do not understand that man. Ichigo said earnestly. During these past few days, Yoruchi and the others had fully laid their cards on the table and been open and honest with him, so he also knew about Aizen's information. However, if Momo were so easily persuaded, she wouldn't be one of the most disliked characters in Bleach. So what? I don't need to understand Captain Aizen. I just want to avenge him. Even if it costs me my life. Momo said hatefully. Hearing this, Ichigo shook his head. Naive, so naive. If some things could be accomplished just by betting one's life, what meaning would this world have? You should know, human life is the least valuable thing. After saying this, Ichigo used Chuunpa, instantly moving from within the circle of Shinigami to right in front of Momo. His Zangetsu was swung. Watching the constantly enlarging Zangetsu blade before her eyes, Momo's pupils contracted sharply. She hurriedly raised her tobium to block. But the moment Zangetsu made contact with tobium, Momo immediately understood why Ichigo said some things couldn't be accomplished even by risking one's life. The force transmitted from Zangetsu was so firm and unstoppable. Even as Momo exerted all her strength, gritting her teeth until they bled, pressing her entire petite body forward, she was still struck by the broadside of Zangetsu. Thud! Struck by the wide blade surface of Zangetsu, Momo flew backwards at high speed like a ball in a killer tennis match. Her petite body crashed into the crowd like a cannonball and exploded. Chapter 106. Time to face your weakness, Aizen. And Ichigo's attack also sounded the horn for battle. Revenge for Captain Aizen. An unknown 5th Division's 3rd seat drew his Zanpakuto and charged at Ichigo. Simultaneously, the surrounding Shinigami swarmed forward. But facing these minor characters, Ichigo wasn't as gentle as he was with Momo. After all, when fighting Momo, he had to consider Hitsugaya. But these ordinary Shinigami? Getsuga Tensho. Blue Ryatsu erupted. Boom! Like a nuclear bomb detonating in the crowd, a ring-shaped Getsuga Tensho exploded. The impactful crescent slash sent everyone flying. So violent, Ichigo. Having long since hidden on a nearby wall, Kukako stood with her arms crossed, supporting her ample bosom, watching the numerous 5th Division's members flying into the sky with a sigh. However, thinking that just one round could annihilate all the Shinigami from the 5th Division who came here would be too disrespectful to the 5th Division. Getsuga Tensho. Another round of Getsuga Tensho exploded, blasting away the remaining elite 5th Division's members. They lay on the ground, unconscious. The elite forces Momo brought to avenge Aizen were completely wiped out by Ichigo's 2 explosive attacks. How is this possible? Momo trembled uncontrollably. Why wouldn't it be possible? If ordinary Shinigami could kill a captain just by risking their lives, then what use would your Captain Aizen be? Ichigo shook his head helplessly. Somehow, under Aizen's care, Momo remained so pure and naive, unlike a lieutenant at all. However, hearing Aizen's name, Momo regained her fighting spirit. Damn Ryoka! Don't you dare mention Captain Aizen! Snap, tobium! Momo released her Zanpakuto. The elongated blade extended and forked, transforming into its Shurkai form. Momo swung her blade, firing a fireball at Ichigo. Looking at the fireball coming from Momo, a flicker of disdain passed through Ichigo's eyes. Soft and weak. And this is a Kido-type Zanpakuto? It's not even as good as the great fireball technique from next door that has never killed anyone. It seems this girl won't give up until she sees her own coffin. Fine. Since you miss your Captain Aizen so much, I'll take you to see him. After saying this, Ichigo lightly cleaved Momo's fireball in 2 with a slash, then used a quick Shuunpa to appear in front of her. Before Momo could react, Zangetsu swiftly slashed forward. Snap! A crisp sound rang. Under Momo's despairing gaze, her fragile, originally not meant for slashing Nanatsuya broke into 2 pieces. Tobium! Seeing her Zanpakuto, which had accompanied her for many years, shattered, Momo's eyes welled with tears. But she didn't cry. Because Ichigo had already delivered a karate chop to Momo. Thud! Momo slowly lost consciousness, then was lightly lifted by Ichigo grabbing her belt. Picking up tobium from the ground, which had returned to its sealed Asachi form after Shurkai release, Ichigo hung the sword back on her waist. At this moment, Kukaku approached, looking curiously at Momo and Ichigo's hand. What, are you planning to take this girl to the Sokayaka too? Why not? Ichigo shrugged. Since she's so infatuated with her Captain Aizen, let's take her to see him. Kukaku typed a question mark. She didn't understand. she's just a pitiful person deceived by Aizen. Is that necessary? Of course. You've mentioned Aizen's various atrocities, right? Ichigo looked meaningfully at Momo in his hand. Yes, what about it? Kukaku looked at Ichigo, puzzled. Aizen used Shinigami for holification experiments, turned Shinigami into hollows, and even directly caused Shiba Kaien's death. His crimes are too numerous to mention. But what does that have to do with Momo? He. Ichigo chuckled but didn't answer. However, this girl Momo is indeed not just a pitiful person deceived by Aizen. The meme about her being a super tank who can survive being slashed by Aizen and stabbed by Toshiro is just teasing. Did Aizen have feelings for Momo? Clearly, he did. Because under Aizen, Momo was not treated like a brainwashed, controlled tool. Think about it, if you really had a hypnosis control cheat, what would you use a person you completely control for? As a plaything, or a tool? But none of these applied to Aizen's treatment of Momo. Momo was neither a plaything nor a tool. Despite her high Kido talent and complete trust and infatuation with Aizen, she wasn't developed into a subordinate by him. Aizen's darkness had nothing to do with Momo. He just wove a dream of a perfect captain for her. And if Momo's value was to propagate Aizen's image? In the original work, there was also a scene where Momo knocked on Aizen's door late at night, waking up Aizen, who was still in pajamas, to chat with her, and falling asleep right there when tired. After Momo fell asleep, there was a close-up of Aizen covering her with a blanket. If Aizen was just acting the role of a good captain, then such an action seemed too earnest. What actor continues to act after leaving the stage? Clearly, even Aizen, who excelled at manipulating people's hearts, showed moments of softness when facing Momo. After defecting, Aizen's personality drastically changed, becoming more aggressive after stabbing Momo. During the battle in Karakura town, Aizen was indifferent to everything except Momo's arrival, which made him open his eyes. Why did Aizen become wary of Jin? Wasn't it precisely because even after slashing Momo twice, he couldn't kill the weakness in his heart, so he didn't believe Jin could kill Ranjiku? Kyokusuajetsu, flowers in the mirror, moon on the water's surface. But who dares to say the moon reflected on the water's surface at that moment wasn't real? At this moment, Aizen sending Momo to intercept Ichigo might also have the intention of sending away this weakness. But how could that be allowed? Ichigo's smile turned sly. Captain Aizen, don't be afraid of your weakness. Face it bravely. Perseverance leads to victory. Go for it. Carrying Momo, Ichigo continued forward. It seemed Momo had brought all the usable 5th Division's members here, so the path ahead was unblocked. However, just as Ichigo was about to reach the foot of the Sokayaku hill, a black sphere suddenly appeared again. Looking at the sphere, Kukaku was startled. This is, from that day. Enma Kurogi. Ichigo supplied the name Kukaku didn't know. The Bankai of the 9th Division Captain, Tozen Kaname. Not sure why it's appearing here. So, is he fighting someone? Kukaku wondered. Let's go see. Come on. Ichigo increased his speed. The two continued forward. So, after walking through a few more streets, Yuri and the others, following the 11th Division's members, appeared before Ichigo. Only, unlike the original work, besides a few seated officers, there were also many ordinary 11th Division's members here. However, Ichigo didn't know that these weren't ordinary 11th Division's members, but Dongwa players within the 11th Division. At this moment, everyone had been informed by Yuma Chika about what they were going to do next. This is the strongest player in our Dongwa right now? He certainly looks extraordinary at first glance. Of course. Even if it were a pig that could defeat 5 captains in a row, you'd have to think it extraordinary. But, let's be honest, we're all human. Why is he so strong? No idea. But I know we've latched onto a thick thigh this time, and we're going to soar. Looking at Ichigo, the eyes of the many 11th Division players sparkled as they discussed. Ichigo, for now, didn't know their identities, just thinking there were a lot of them. Chapter 107 The Cowardly Randu. Inoue, Ishida, Chad, what's your situation? Ichigo greeted them curiously. Turning around and seeing Ichigo, the three were also excited. Ichigo! And Kukaku-san! It's great that you're okay. Orihime, wearing a Shinigami uniform, happily ran over, leaping and colliding into Ichigo's arms with her substantial assets. At the same time, Chad and Yuryu approached. Ichigo, long time no see. Ichigo, did you really kill a captain? Of course not. Regarding Yuryu's question, Ichigo rolled his eyes. Why would I kill a captain? Hearing Ichigo's words, everyone chose to believe him. Yuichiro, Ikaku, and Sister Mei, Yumachika, walked over and greeted. Our captain thought he'd have to go to the Sokayaku to find you. Didn't expect you to appear behind us instead. Well, can't be helped. I wanted to, but I was tricked. Ichigo scratched his cheek. It's fine. Ken-chan is happily fighting now too. Even though Ichigo-chan didn't come, Ken-chan found an opponent. Yuichiro said cutely. Hearing this, Ichigo commented sarcastically, found an opponent? What kind of wild phrase is that? Wow, not important, not important. Yuichiro jumped onto Ichigo's back, grabbing his hair and pulling his ears, very enthusiastic about Ichigo whom she hadn't seen for days. Of course, Ichigo, being tormented by the loli, didn't really want this enthusiasm. After a few exchanges and inquiries, Ichigo also understood the current situation. Kenpachi wanted to go to the Sokayaku to find me. At the same time, the 11th Division's members received a mission to station at the foot of the Sokayaku Hill. So he was leading you towards the Sokayaku Hill but got intercepted halfway by Tozen Kaname and Kamamura Sajin, who wouldn't allow the Ryoka to pass and wanted to arrest them. Then a fight broke out. Ichigo understood the reasons for everyone being here. Except for gathering ordinary members for the stationing mission, it wasn't much different from the original work. Ichigo asked further, by the way, how did you end up walking together with the 11th Division? It's like this. Yuryu adjusted his glasses and stepped forward, narrating their experiences these past days. I see. After finishing the letter from Fei Quan and hearing Yuryu's description of their recent situation, Ichigo nodded. The situation in the Soul Society, the situation of the players, he fully understood now. Ichigo looked at Yumachika, nodding gratefully, acknowledging this favor. He was truly thankful that Sister Mei could have the 11th Division escort Orihime and the other two. Alright, since everyone is gathered again, let's continue. To the Sokayaku Hill. To rescue Rukia. At this moment, with Saraki fighting Tozen, Ichigo, being the strongest, became the highest commander of the group. Ooh. Everyone nodded, no objections. Among the ordinary 11th Division's members, the normal natives followed Zaraki's orders, and the rest were players, who also had no objections. The large group set off and soon arrived at the foot of the Sokayaku Hill. However, due to the change caused by Ichigo killing Aizen, another predicament arose. At the foot of the Sokayaku Hill, there were heavy troops guarding. 9th Division's Lieutenant, Hisei Shuei, 7th Division's Lieutenant, Iba Tetsuziman, 2nd Division's Lieutenant, Omida Marekio. A full 3 division lieutenants, leading a large number of Shinigami, were guarding the foot of the Sokayaku. In fact, if Momo hadn't left her post to search for Ichigo, even she would be here guarding. They really came. Looking at the crowd of 11th Division, Randu, or rather, the public persona of Omida, showed a flicker of excitement. Landi had been frantically searching for possible threats to him, finally locking onto the players. Upon learning the news that the 11th Division had taken in the Ryoka, Landi deduced Yumachika's next course of action. So he specifically informed Randu and, under the pretext of heightened security, gathered people here to guard together. No matter what Sister Mei intended by accepting the Ryoka, his actions placed him in opposition to the Soul Society. Therefore, Landi could leverage the situation. The many Shinigami and the other 2 lieutenants were the influence they leveraged. Utilizing the local forces, the Suriitii players from Shigwa vowed to eliminate the Suriitii players from Dongwa here. As for the anticipated appearance of Ichigo, Lan deduced they didn't need to worry. Because Ichigo would inevitably appear at the Sokayaku Hills execution site to directly rescue Rukia. With his strength, he wouldn't bother with small fry. Lan Da's judgment was quite accurate. Originally, it should have been like this. But who told Ichigo encountered a sulking little cat? Just as Randu was smug about finally being able to take out these tough Dongwa players from the 11th Division. Beside him, Iba stepped forward, drawing his sword and pointing at Ichigo. "Kurosaki Ichigo, release Lieutenant Hinamori in your hand. Or don't blame me for not holding back." Simultaneously, Iba scolded the 11th Division's members flanking Ichigo. "This is the villain who killed Captain Aizen. Why are you still associating with him? Has the 11th Division betrayed the Suriiti? I don't recall the 11th Division becoming like this." Hearing Iba's words, Ichigo stepped forward, carrying his sword on his shoulder. "Hey, what betrayal? Such harsh words, Iba. Our 11th Division is under orders to escort these Ryoka to the Sokayaku Hill. That's the captain's command. And Ichigo is not the murderer of Captain Aizen. We are certain of that." Hisagi stepped forward. "You say he's not, so he's not?" This was Captain Unohana Retsu's own judgment. "Reap, Kazushini." Ryatsu surged. Facing the cunning villain who killed Aizen, Hisagi didn't even care about his own dislike Shirkai anymore, directly releasing his Zanpakuto. Following Hisagi's action, the many Shinigami also instantly prepared for battle. The light of various and sundry Shirkai releases shone, and all sorts of strange weapons appeared. In response, the 11th Division members drew their swords. For a moment, at the foot of the Sokayaku Hill, everyone entered a state of swords drawn and bows bent. The situation grew tense. However, among the many who drew swords and released Shirkai, there was one exception. Looking at Ichigo holding Momo with one hand, Randu trembled all over. His heart shook violently. Intense fear even made his teeth chatter. Inwardly, Randu cursed Landa frantically. "You said Kurosaki Ichigo wouldn't appear. Why is this peerless fierce person here? Landa, you bastard. The influence we leveraged isn't enough." Omida's cowardly lizard demeanor was quickly noticed by the serious parties on both sides. The corners of Yuma Chika's mouth slightly curved. Hisagi and Iba frowned deeply. Watching this, the live stream audience laughed heartily. Pathetic little Lande, laughable, laughable. Calculating and calculating, still miscalculated in the end. Feel sorry for Randu, screwed by Landa's calculations. Coming to intercept Ichigo with just these people, he's probably going to be sacrificed now. The audience mocked and ridiculed Randu's situation. Simultaneously, they discussed. "Hey, what do you think? With the information from Fei Quan, will Ichigo kill these Shigwa players? I think he will. You all know how decisive Ichigo is. The problem is, they're inside. They should know this is a live stream. Killing on stream, aren't Ichigo and the others afraid of causing turmoil in the outside world?" Previous commenter, what are you thinking? Isn't the persecution of our Dongwa players by these Shigwa dogs killing? Are you an apologist public intellectual? Anyway, I support Ichigo. You jerk. Who are you calling a public intellectual? Did I say I didn't support him? I'm just worried. Chapter 108 Massacre. Worry about what? What is there to worry about? Ichigo is inside, not outside. A general in the field is not bound by orders from the sovereign. He handles matters inside, while we handle matters outside. At worst, we just fight a battle. Anyway, after 2.5 years when Ichigo comes out with his power, those Shigwa dogs will be completely left behind. Just 2.5 years. Could anyone possibly use 2.5 years to wipe us out? That's right. Everyone agreed with the words of the earlier brother. However, if one only sees this level of the conflict regarding the Dongwa and Shigwa players, it's merely ordinary situational analysis. Regarding the conflict between the Dongwa and Shigwa players, some analytical masters saw more. Brothers, let me say this. Compared to the turmoil you mentioned, I'm actually more concerned about the game's attitude. You all know the definition of using game currency to press a bet. It's giving someone a trial, difficult but not impossible to resist. But for Landa's trial, after Fei Quan told Ichigo about the matter, Landa basically had no room for struggle, it's certain death. This undoubtedly violates the game rules. But why would the game violate its own rules to ensure Landa's death? Don't you remember the game's prompt? It doesn't want players fighting each other. And Landa clearly paid no attention to this prompt. He's been constantly finding ways to fight Dongwa players and persecute them. So, Landa didn't give the players he persecuted a chance, so the game isn't giving him a chance either. When Ichigo arrived, the game began guiding him to clean up the Shigwa players. It's because the game is very displeased with those who actively disrupt order. Everyone was shocked by the words of this analytical master. Holy crap, you can interpret it that way? But why does what you say sound so reasonable? It does make sense. So, if there are games in the future, should we treat the game's prompts as rules? The analytical master replied, best to do so. After all, we don't fully understand the game's power. But this is something to consider later. After saying this, the analytical master fell silent. However, his words sparked deep thought among everyone. And it must be said, the analytical master truly is an analytical master. The game indeed thought this way. Every player is valuable, and the game cannot tolerate internal consumption of that value. Perhaps even Ichigo didn't expect that one day he would be someone else's blade. Of course, it's a blade he's willing to be. Watching the standoff ahead, Ichigo yawned, feeling somewhat bored. But then, atop the Sokayako hill, a scorching Ryatsu began to grow restless. Exclamation point. Ichigo was startled, feeling urgent. Although I don't want to fight you, I'm in a bit of a hurry. Bypassing the people still glaring at each other, Ichigo, holding Momo in one hand and drawing Zangetsu with the other, took the initiative to attack first. And his first target was precisely Omida, the protective umbrella for the Shigwa players. Facing Ichigo's assault, Randu finally released his Shurkai. Crush, Gejetsuburi. A huge spiked ball and chain appeared in Randu's hand and was thrown at Ichigo. Unfortunately, among the generally weak lieutenants, Omida is a good identity. His Shurkai is very powerful, even earning him the title Omida-sama. And Omida's actual strength isn't as pathetic as his appearance suggests. However, the person replacing Omida was clearly inferior to the original. Gejetsuburi was thrown, clashing with Zangetsu. The seemingly heavy spiked ball was easily shattered by Ichigo's blade. Simultaneously, blue Ryatsu gathered on Ichigo's blade. Getsuga Tensho. A full-power Getsuga Tensho slashed towards Randu. Driven by fear of death, Randu used Omida's signature Shuunpa. Oh, not bad? Seeing his Getsuga Tensho dodged, Ichigo was a bit surprised. On the player ranking this month, Randu's points had also jumped up significantly. Clearly, during the life and death crisis just now, he had achieved a breakthrough. However, facing Ichigo, such a breakthrough wasn't enough. It just means one more slash. Ichigo followed closely with Hirenkyaku, which is faster and more agile, easily catching up to Randu fleeing with Shuunpa. Zangetsu came down. Slash. Struck by the sharp Zangetsu, Randu's entire body was cut into two halves by a single slash. A large amount of blood and Randu's multicolored internal organs spilled onto the ground. A lieutenant was instantly killed by Ichigo with one slash. Everyone was shocked seeing this scene. Lieutenant Omida dash. Hisagi exclaimed. Damn Ryoka. Hisagi swung his Kazashini at Ichigo, trying to trap him. However, their fierce attacks and murderous intent towards Ichigo weakened in the next moment. Because the current Omida had returned to his complete, unharmed state. Randu had died within him, and the real Omida Marekio was back. But Ichigo didn't care about this now. Lightly deflecting Hiseiji's Kazushini, Ichigo shunput into the midst of the second division crowd. Following the list Fei Quan provided, Ichigo slashed one after another, like mowing grass in a Muzu game. For a moment, limbs and body parts of Shigwa players flew everywhere. One by one, 2 ND Division's members fell unconscious. But in the eyes of the natives, they were merely knocked out by Ichigo. However, the players themselves weren't under any perceptual block. The sight of their companions being disemboweled was still clearly remembered. No! Help! Spare me! I was wrong, I was wrong. I want to confess to God. Let me go. Numerous wails arose. However, hearing the wails of these Shigwa players, Ichigo's heart was like iron. He didn't specifically hunt down Shigwa players, but anyone blocking his path was inevitably slain with a single slash. In just one short minute, the majority of the players in the second division were slaughtered by Ichigo. The terrifying speed of the massacre was shocking. Then, having completely cut through the second division formation, Ichigo continued his rapid Shunpa sprint towards the top of the Sokayaku Hill. Chapter 109: The Obsessed Suifo? At this moment, atop the Sokayaku Hill, Rukia had been bound with her hands to a small white block, slowly ascending towards the peak of the Sokayaku. She hadn't made any request to Yamamoto to spare Ichigo and the others. Rukia was very calm. She was waiting for Ichigo's arrival, firmly believing he would save her. Seeing Rukia like this, below the Sokayaku, 1st Division's lieutenant, Chojiro Sasuke frowned. He had seen such a gaze before. Well, in the mirror. Because it was the same gaze as his own. A gaze of deep trust in someone. So, just as I deeply trust the Captain Commander, Rukia deeply trusts that Ryoka, Kurosaki Ichigo? An unbelievable thought arose in Sasuke's mind. The problem is, even if Ichigo defeated 5 captains, even killed 1 captain, how can he be compared to the Captain Commander? Mere captains. To speak proudly, as long as Sasuke released his Bankai, half of the current captains in the Soul Society wouldn't be his match. This was also his confidence for never arguing whenever he was mocked as the non-fighting lieutenant. His Bankai existed for Yamamoto, not for his own show of force. So, Rukia trusting that Ichigo the same way he trusts the Captain Commander, how is that possible? No one could surpass him in trusting the Captain Commander. No one. Sasuke shook his head, murmuring. Noticing Sasuke's movement, Yamamoto turned his head, emitting a questioning grunt. Sasuke shook his head, indicating it was nothing. So Captain Commander Yamamoto turned back, looking up at Rukia in the sky, waiting for the Sokayaku execution. However, this small interaction between the old partners didn't attract much attention. Because undercurrents had long been swirling on the Sokayaku Hill. Watching the gradually forming Firebird, Kayaraku's wandering gaze looked into the distance, wondering why Yukitake hadn't arrived yet. Simultaneously, beside Kayaraku stood a recently healed Byakuya and Rinji. Watching the Firebird about to attack, Rinji was desperately giving Byakuya meaningful looks. To their right, without the bulky Omida blocking the view, Suifome also noticed the strange interactions, frowning as she looked over, her small hands slowly resting on the short sword behind her back. As for Unohana? Unohana wasn't here. In the original work, Aizen just died, leaving a corpse. But now, Aizen was dead and had framed Ichigo. This completely ignited Unohana's suspicions. That's why she was still investigating Aizen's situation. On the Sokayaku Hill, there were only Suifome, Byakuya, Renji, Kayaraku, Ayasunaneo, and the 1st Division's captain and lieutenant. At the same time, Suifome's blatant scrutiny was slightly noticed by Byakuya, who turned to look. Suifome, with excellent acting skills, shifted her gaze without a trace. However, after shifting her gaze, Suifome's expression suddenly froze. Because, at the edge of her vision, a graceful figure she had longed for nearly a century appeared before her eyes once again. Noticing Suifome's gaze, Yoruchi smiled and waved at her. Shihoin Yoruchi. Suifome's exclamation burst out. Her words completely attracted the attention of the captains present. Yoruchi? Where? The captains looked in the direction Suifeng was staring. There was nothing there. Then they turned back to look at Suifeng, their eyes conveying very strange meanings. Is this girl so obsessed with Yoruchi she started hallucinating? In the Soul Society, every captain possesses great personal charisma. Because Shirkai is the external manifestation of personality, and Bankai is the liberation of the inner truth. Thus, captains who have comprehended their own truth can be said to have unity of knowledge and action, their hearts and deeds clear as a mirror, their actions all for justice. Even if that justice is only self-perceived justice. Therefore, factors like authority, strength, etc., stacked, the influence a captain has on their lieutenant or close subordinates can reach the level of changing a person's heart. The most obvious example is the 9th Division's lieutenant, Hisagi Shuei. Because he was saved by Mugyuruma Kensei as a child, he vowed to become a Shinigami, tattooed the number 69 on his face, and awakened the Zanpakuto, Kazushini. Yet, because he disliked his Zanpakuto's shape being for beheading and its name being bad, he was lectured by Tozen and inherited the other's justice of not wielding a sword for oneself. T/N, Kazushini means death wind. Therefore, his Zanpakuto's Bankai links the Ryatsu of both parties, resulting in mutual destruction, requiring a third person to deliver the final blow when the enemy is weak. From Shirkai to Bankai, Hisagi was influenced by two people successively. As for someone like Suifeng, a trusted subordinate personally trained by Yoruchi since childhood, the influence is naturally deeper. Calling her Yoruchi's shape is not an exaggeration at all. At this moment, facing the questioning looks from the captains, Suifeng had bitterness she couldn't express. After seeing the Shihoin clan's heaven-stepping adornment that day, she had indeed been constantly thinking about Yoruchi. For a moment, even Suifeng herself wasn't sure if it was a hallucination or reality. Because such situations had genuinely occurred when Yoruchi first left. Frustrated, Suifeng shifted her gaze to the Sokayaku, forcing herself not to think random thoughts. At this point, the Sokayaku had been fully released. The firebird forged from 1,000,000 Zanpakuto announced its existence with a triumphant cry. Billowing heat waves transmitted from the sky to the people below, and the burning flames dyed half the sky red. The execution of Rukia was about to begin. Clink clink. The faint sound of blade friction came. Renji had grasped Zabumaru, agitated. His movement attracted everyone's attention. Because of this, no one noticed that above the Sokayaku, a person was flying atop it using the Shihoin clan's heaven-stepping adornment. Facing Rukia, the Sokayaku slowly drew back, gathering power. The final charging execution was imminent. Captain! Seeing this, Renji finally couldn't help but call out. Hearing Renji's urging, Byakuya, who was closely watching the Sokayaku in the sky, also roared back without hesitation, "Shut up, Renji." Having experienced the battle with Ichigo, Byakuya had already resolved his inner conflicts. Because being defeated in battle made him realize his previous stance was wrong. The current Byakuya decided to rescue Rukia. However, after finding Yoruchi, or rather, after Yoruchi found him, she told Byakuya that someone would block the Sokayaku for Rukia. So Byakuya was still waiting. And now, having gathered enough power, the Sokayaku finally launched its assault. The massive firebird charged at Rukia with the momentum to incinerate everything. Watching the Sokayaku before her intent on burning her to ashes, Rukia seemed to sense something and looked up. Simultaneously, Ichigo deactivated the flight of heaven-stepping adornment. Meeting Rukia's gaze, Ichigo showed a smile. "Yo, Rukia! I came to save you." Saying this, Ichigo nimbly placed himself in front of the Sokayaku. Boom! The Sokayaku collided with Zangetsu, producing a tremendous sound. Then, blocked by Ichigo, the Sokayaku seemed angered. It drew back, gathering power, wanting to attack again. But at this moment, Ichigo's brown eyes suddenly filled with blue light. On Zangetsu, slung across his back, the light of Getsuga Tensho bloomed. "So, you're the one formed from 1,000,000 Zanpakuto, huh?" Ichigo turned, swung his blade. A Getsuga Tensho larger than any before, as long as the Sokayaku itself, shot forth from Zangetsu. Under the pressure of the powerful Getsuga Tensho, the air solidified like a glacier. Thus, the Getsuga Tensho was like an icebreaker, cutting through the solidified air, causing cracking sounds one after another. With intense shockwaves, the Getsuga Tensho squarely struck the Sokayaku Firebird's neck. Violent flames exploded. Screech! The Sokayaku Firebird let out a shriek of pain. Ichigo's slash had thrown the entire bird off balance, its head flipping nearly 180 degrees upwards. The Sokayaku hastily flapped its wings to regain balance. As its enormous wings beat, streams of flame fell towards the ground below. The few captains and lieutenants present continuously dodged amidst the falling flames. However, watching the scene in the sky, they completely disregarded the flames falling from the Sokayaku. Suifeng muttered in shock, "How is this possible?" The Sokayaku, formed from a million Zanpakuto, was knocked off balance by a single slash from that Ryoka? Coincidentally close to Suifeng, Kairaku, holding Nanao, also heard Suifeng's words. He pressed down his hat, looking at the sky. "It is truly astonishing, young Kurosaki." Meanwhile, while dodging, Sasuke looked at the unmoving Yamamoto beside him and asked, "Captain Commander, what do we do now?" Facing Sasuke's question, Yamamoto did not answer. He merely narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at Ichigo in the sky, making his own judgment. At this moment, in the sky, the Sokayaku Firebird, having finally righted itself with great difficulty, was furious. It shrieked, charging recklessly at Ichigo. Fortunately, at this time, Yukitake arrived with the Shihoin shield. "Stop right there!" From the Shihoin shield, ropes extended, binding the Sokayaku in the sky. Chapter 110. The Suriitii is full of traitors. Under Yukitake's efforts, the Sokayaku's movements gradually slowed but still struggled. So he looked to the side and called out, "Shunsui! Coming!" Kairaku jumped out, taking hold of the other part of the Shihoin shield and driving it heavily into the ground. With the combined strength of the two captains, the enormous Sokayaku was actually stopped by them. Seeing this, Suifeng shouted in disbelief, "Captain Yukitake! Captain Kairaku! Do you know what you are doing?" As she spoke, Suifeng moved her feet. But before she could state her intentions, Byakuya and Renji subtly shifted their positions, directly blocking her path. Suifeng's eyes widened in shock. "Captain Kachiki, even you." Out of the 5 captains on Sokayaku Hill, 3 had essentially turned traitor in an instant. The situation had escalated to its most critical stage. Gritting her teeth, Suifeng gripped her Zanpakuto. But then, from not far away, another figure came rushing in with incredible speed. Her speed was so fast that even the dust couldn't keep up. "Thanks, Byakuya boy." Leaving those words behind, Yoruchi, carrying Suifeng, plummeted towards the forest at the foot of Sokayaku Hill. Instantly, another captain was gone from Sokayaku Hill. In terms of numbers, Yamamoto and Sasuke were now vastly outnumbered by Kairaku, Yukitake, Byakuya, Renji, and Ichigo. Watching this scene, someone couldn't help but type this line. "Holy smokes, the Soul Society's captains. It's actually full of traitors." Kenpachi blocks 2, Toshiro is an actor, +3 here, and Sister Hana leaning towards Ichigo. Out of the 13 divisions of the Suriitii, at least 6 are traitors? "Captain Commander, I'm all alone?" Watching the scene on Sokayaku Hill where many captains began helping Ichigo, the comments section buzzed with discussion. They wildly speculated about the Captain Commander's state of mind. Unfortunately, this was just a live stream, not an anime broadcast, so how Yamamoto felt watching this remained unknown. However, one thing was certain. That was, Yamamoto is truly angry. "Chojiro." Yamamoto looked at his subordinate. "Yes, Genryose-sama." As if realizing something, Sasuke straightened his back and responded loudly. Looking at this loyal subordinate who had accompanied him for 2,000 years, a touch of tenderness appeared in Yamamoto's eyes. "Chojiro, the time has come. Today is the day for you to use your Bankai. Go. Apprehend the criminal Rukia, slay the Ryoka invading the Soul Society, and show me the power of the Bankai you have trained for 2,000 years." Hearing Yamamoto's words, Sasaki flushed with excitement and immediately drew his Zanpakuto. I will not fail your expectations, Genryose-sama. After speaking, Sasaki. This genius who had remained silent for Yamamoto for 2,000 years, who once achieved Bankai in just 1 month, walked towards Ichigo. Meanwhile, Ichigo had just shattered the Sekiseki restraining Rukia and pulled her close. Looking at Rukia, Ichigo asked with concern, Rukia, are you okay? I've come to fulfill my promise. Yes, I'm fine, Ichigo. I knew you would come to save me. Rukia said joyfully. However, kind-hearted Rukia, looking down at Kairaku and Yukitake restraining the Sokayaku below, still showed a flicker of worry in her eyes. Ichigo, although I believed you would come to save me, I still don't understand. I am ultimately a criminal. Now Captain Yukitake has joined Captain Kairaku to act for me. How will this farce end? Hearing Rukia's question, the people in Ichigo's livestream stopped discussing Yamamoto's state and began discussing among themselves. Yeah, we used to say commit crimes, then receive amnesty. But the Soul Society's attitude is very firm. Even after Ichigo has done all this, they refuse to offer amnesty. Now more captains have acted. And in the Soul Society structure, the Central 46 is the highest authority. Captains acting out basically equals rebellion. Could it be that Ichigo entered the Soul Society to rescue Rukia and is now about to overturn the entire Soul Society regime? But earlier, didn't Yoruchi mention a big boss, Aizen? He wants the Hogyoku inside Rukia. Now that Aizen is faking his death, won't he just come out? Did you forget? The Hogyoku in Rukia is supposed to be extracted by the Sokayaku. Now the Sokayaku is stopped. What if Aizen takes this chance to fake his death and quietly leave? Whoa, from that angle, it shouldn't go that far, right? How could a boss be that lazy? Hard to say. Because of Rukia's one sentence, everyone began to worry about the future. However, among the people present, including the captains below, Byakuya determined to save his sister, the reckless Renji, and even Yamamoto, possibly no one was as resolute as Ichigo. Ichigo wasn't concerned about Rukia's worries. Heh, you called it a farce yourself. When it can't go on any further, it will naturally end. Before that, all we need to do is wait. Rukia was very puzzled by Ichigo's words. Wait? Ichigo nodded. Yes, wait. Haven't you noticed that Toshiro and Captain Unohana aren't here? They've gone to the Central 46. Your crime this time originally didn't deserve death. Toshiro and Captain Unohana going to question them directly, any problems will be discovered quickly. Is that so? Rukia was shocked, even somewhat apprehensive. For the sake of someone like me, Captain Unohana actually went to question the Central 46. And Ichigo, everyone. Fighting other captains for me, even defying Captain Commander Yamamoto, what have I done to deserve this? Ichigo laughed heartily, ruffling Rukia's wonderfully textured mushroom-cut hair. Don't worry about that. Leave it to us. After saying this, Ichigo jumped down from the Sokayaku. Renji and Byakuya had been waiting below for a long time. Looking at the two of them, Rukia's expression was complicated. Renji. Oni-sama. Rukia initially thought these two were here to stop her. But seeing their expressions, Rukia understood. Wait, Ichigo, you just said US? Could it be? Ichigo showed a smile. That's right. I think after that battle at the Senzakyu, your Oni-chan's brain has been knocked a bit clearer by me. Hearing Ichigo's words, Byakuya's face darkened, but he didn't refute anything. Instantly, Rukia was overjoyed. But at that moment, Sasaki, having received Yamamoto's order, arrived. Facing Byakuya and Renji, Sasaki sternly questioned. Captain Kuchiki, Lieutenant Abarai, are you taking the side of the Ryoka? Hearing this, Renji, who wanted to say something to Rukia but didn't know what, showed an impatient look. In Soul Society's legends, Sasaki was known as the non-fighting lieutenant, even secretly called a coward. He was said to know Bankai but had never used it, usually just following Yamamoto. Renji, who had served in the 11th Division, looked down on this type of person. Renji spoke irritably, so what if we are? What can you? Ranji. Renji's mocking words were cut off by Byakuya. Looking somewhat grave at Sasakaibe, Byakuya spoke seriously. That's correct. Taking care of my sister is a vow I made to my late wife. I once wanted to abide by the Soul Society's rules, but I failed. Now I only wish to fulfill my promise to my late wife. I see. Hearing Byakuya's words, Sasakaibe's stern expression relaxed slightly. He had heard about Byakuya's circumstances. Thinking this way, his choice was understandable. At least this reason wasn't dislikable. I believe if Captain Kuchiki formally submitted a request to the Captain Commander, he would reduce Kuchiki Rukia's sentence. So, please step aside now. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated and Taking Over Ichigo's Body. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.